Is practice necessary? A talk with Unmani.
Well, it's one of those paradox kind of questions, really, or answers, because on one hand, we can say, well, our true nature is already all that we are trying to become. Our true nature is always aware. It is always whole. It is always absolute love, peace, stillness. It is already fully enlightened or awakened. It is absolute freedom already. So no amount of practice will ever help you become that, because it is already who you are. Although knowing that intellectually is just an intellectual concept, right? And doesn't help you at all, or doesn't give you a sense of coming home to your true nature, of truly knowing that you are all that. And this is why having an intellectual concept about this is a world apart from recognizing this for yourself. So one practice can be reading spiritual books. And this can be very supportive in a way in that sometimes the words and the concepts jump from being just words and concepts on a page to actually being a deep recognition and insight. In which case it's got nothing to do with the words anymore, or the practice of reading them. So you could say, well, it was nothing to do with reading those books. But on the other hand, it seemed to be a trigger. Sometimes these words carry a certain energy from where they have been spoken or written. And this can be transmitted to the one that is listening. It's not about the person who wrote the book or said the words. It's about what is being pointed to and from where to, and then when it jumps from that to being heard as being pointed to you, then this is a recognition that is beyond the intellectual concepts. And there are many practices, there are unlimited practices. And many of these practices, or let's say most of these practices, create a certain experience which can be pleasurable, can be expansive, can bring a sense of peace while you're practicing, or perhaps for a while afterwards. But if you don't practice anymore, the experience fades. So sometimes these practices can become almost like an addiction to a drug, where you have a certain experience, a certain high, and when that fades, you want the next fix again. And many spiritual seekers are quite addicted to these kind of practices. And there are practices where there's an attempt to create a sense of recognition. For example, the question, who am I? Self-inquiry. The intention with this question is not to be a practice that you practice regularly in order to create a nice experience. No, it's about actually creating a recognition in you. When you ask this question, when you see that you are not this and you're not that and not this and not that, that you recognize beyond all of the words and concepts who you are not, in fact, who you are. Right? But of course, many people misunderstand this and turn it into a practice. Perhaps with some practice, you might have a moment of recognition, but then the mind comes in wanting to grasp that or do that again, or make it mean something, as if you have arrived somewhere. And so then when the experience of the recognition, because many times the recognition itself comes with a certain experience. It might have an experience of expansion that is somehow associated with it, but the experience of expansion will fade eventually. And so then we try to recreate that experience of expansion and recognition again and again. That's not bad. It's not a bad thing. It's not wrong. And sometimes in having more than one experience of recognition, this can be a confirmation again and again of this knowing that is beyond all concepts. Sometimes it does need to be recognized again and again for a while, so that you really acknowledge and trust that this is the ultimate truth. And then at a certain point, you no longer need to recreate that experience of recognition again and again, because it's known. It's lived from. So therefore, the experience is no longer seen to be the point. So practice can be also very helpful to support this body-mind, to create a sense of calm and peace, but also to see through a lot of mental patterns, conditioning, protection layers, to open energetically more and more, physically, emotionally, also mentally. And all of these kinds of practices are very useful for more and more maturing for this human, to mature and to live in a more open and free way. But if you're just trying to free this human, without acknowledging the truth of who you are beyond this human, then you will be, in a way, trying to polish this human endlessly, making every pattern or concept, belief that seems to be a blockage in your experience, some kind of problem to be fixed. And this is really endless, because this human is imperfect. This human will always have issues and human stuff. So any kind of practice that supports this body-mind, although is very useful and supportive, it always needs to go together with the other side of the paradox of recognizing that there is no need to fix this human at all. So it's not that this human has nothing left to learn. Of course, we are always, as humans, we are growing and learning and evolving endlessly. And this is beautiful. But it is a paradox. Who you or I am is not just limited to this human experience or this human living in time with my past issues and hoping to deal with them in the future or become a better person in the future. I'm not just that. I and you are, in fact, the awareness of that simultaneously. At the same time as being this human, I'm also the awareness of this human. So I might practice something to support this human, while all the while knowing that none of it's necessary. And this is, it's quite a joke in a sense, that we can hold these two seemingly opposing ways of seeing at the same time. The bigger picture is that who I am, doesn't need any improvement. It doesn't need any practice. It's already everything that this human might be trying to become. But at the same time, if this human is living with a lot of trauma or beliefs that seem to limit herself or certain dramas that are fed into, or identities that are believed in, then it is clear that the more we look at these things, the more we free these human areas of ourselves, the more this human can live more freely. But when we recognize our true nature as that awareness of it all, then the exploration or the practice for this human happens much more effortlessly. We're no longer trying to reach a goal of some superhuman perfection. We are simply holding this human in unconditional love. This is what the awareness that you are is, right? It's unconditional seeing, holding, accepting this human just the way he or she is. And then within that, there's a kind of curiosity as to what are these patterns that I seem to be believing in or playing out in my life. And why would I do that when I am freedom itself? So then with this curiosity, there's a following, a thread, or, following a certain pattern, looking at it with curiosity, not trying to fix it or get rid of it or push it away, but just with curiosity, like, oh, hello, what do you want to say, this part of myself. And this is a very gentle and beautiful process, in fact, of falling away more and more of these limitations and restrictions in our human experience. And this is where a practice can be very supportive, as long as it's held lightly, without a goal. It's just seen to be supportive for this unfolding, this process of falling away, of losing more and more of the ground under your feet that you believed in, losing more and more of who you thought you were, living more and more in alignment with who you really are as that awareness of it all. And more you live simply as this that you are, this true nature. And there are no problems or issues. There's just simply a curiosity at this human, falling in love, in fact, with this human just the way he or she is.